So this is part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel, scheduled at 22:10 hours GMT, so coming online about 2 minutes after the stated time on Sunday, the 12th of December 2021. And the Sunday Times today, the political headline on page 1 says that Boris Johnson is facing rebellion from 60 Conservative MPs. Now, the news since the Sunday Times was printed has been that the political murderer of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, has repeated his corrupt stance and has reiterated his loyalty to Boris Johnson. Can you believe it? But that's what it is. That's what he is doing. Despite the fact that even the Guardian Observer is running the front page piece about falling trust in Johnson. And Johnson is actually desperately trying to shift the political attention away from his failures, his dishonesty and his lying, by concentrating as much attention as he can to the image of him dealing with the virus. So there are two headlines on pages 4 and 5 of the Observer. One is the fact that clinics defying government advice and giving over 18s their booster vaccinations now. And the second one on page 5 is that mothers and babies put at risk as vital health services fail to reopen. Now we shall go into some detail about that shortly. And there is a piece from the graveyard on page 8. It appears that the Observer believes that the Labour Party is alive. It says poll gives Labour 9-point lead over crisis-hit Conservatives. That suggests that the Labour Party, in the fantasy of the Guardian Observer, is alive. The Labour Party is not alive. The Labour Party is politically dead. Despite the fact that there is this severe risk that Johnson faces career-wise, it is not certain that the Conservatives will be ousted at the next election and that Starmer will form a Labour government. And there is this other piece about the health crisis number of healthy patients stranded in hospital wards rises 80%, which is where we start looking at the state of the health of the sickness of the NHS. We use the term sickness not to deny the various services that some of the health services are providing to people, but our analysis goes back to the founding of the or launching of the idea of an NHS in the late 1940s. And we have maintained that although the idea of the NHS was launched in the 1940s, the NHS never took off. The NHS has never taken off. And that's not because the idea was wrong, but because there has been no political party in Britain that actually has believed in the idea taking off. Secondly, every single political party in this country, in the UK, has been corrupt. The difference between them or among them is only measured by the amount, the depth of corruption in each of them. And the Labour Party has been guilty of overhyping its claim about its being the owner of the idea of launching the National Health Service. Because corruption continues to control the management of the resources and the access made available to people who need health service. Remember the phrase point of need? Free health service at the point of need. It has never been realized. And the National Health Service, although a significant number of people working in the National Health Service are from African and Asian backgrounds of all kinds of skills and abilities, the politics of the National Health Service, like the politics of the rest of the UK state, has been dominated by racism and racist prejudice. That defies the fact that people in the workforce are, many of them, doctors, nurses, and ancillary workers, have been from the backgrounds, African and Asian backgrounds. Despite all of that, the racist prejudice and denial and discrimination against people of African and Asian origins needing health service, that discrimination has been dominant. Even when the NHS employee concerned at the point of contact has been of African and Asian origin. The African and Asian origin patients have never received equal treatment. Now, that's not just confined to the National Health Service. It's actually defined by racism that dominates the society. So my theory of prima facie non-entitlement, this is a practical description in my theory, PFNE, prima facie non-entitlement. You look at the person in need of service and you discriminate against them. You don't recognize them as equally entitled or normally entitled. That is my theory, my definition of PFNI or PFNE, prima facie non-entitlement, which is racist. So the actual provider at the point of contact at the health facility, either the GP surgery or the hospital unit or health center, is being seen as being less than entitled. That's the mindset. That's the brainwashed mindset that is controlling the mind and the attitude and the outlook of the nurse, the doctor, and any other kind of health assistant or health providing staff. So the Asian person or the African person at the health facility, health center, the kind of table, if you like, on the other side of the table, opposite to the health service person, is being seen as less entitled. And therefore, the health needs of that person are being denied. And you extrapolate, apply across the board that mentality. And what you are looking at is denial of health service at the normal time. And tonight's pre-recorded broadcast by the Congenital Liar, Boris Johnson, which was billed as being timed at 2000 hours GMT today, Sunday, the 12th of December 2021. This has said a number of things that are completely false. The textbook statements and pledges and kind of offers of vaccinations and all the other things. But as I said, the prima facie non-entitlement, that is racist discrimination, disentitles hundreds of thousands of people at the point of need, at the point of supposed offer, or at the point of the supposed offered service. And none of the flea street papers or their outlets or their internet outlets, because the papers were printed yesterday, about more than let's say 20 hours ago. The next one has been printed now, anything between 6 to 8 hours ago. And they won't have, those papers won't have, unless they had special facilities at the printers organized to carry, or the embargoed copy that was actually printed with the assumption that the time of the printed versions would have been timed hours after the 8 o'clock local time or the 2000 hours GMT, which was the timeline for the statement by Boris Johnson. So the virus is one emergency which has got only a fraction of the people or the population, the overall demography affected by the virus. And if you multiply the denial of service because of racism, prima facie non-entitlement, and you extrapolate that and multiply that by the numbers of other illnesses, other needs of medical health for medical health and service, then you find that millions of cases, hundreds of thousands multiplied by various additional cases or causes for treatment and health service. So the millions of cases of health service denials take place every single week in the UK because of racism. In other words, in my theory, in my words, PFNE, prima facie non-entitlement. So although Johnson is saying that there is an emergency this week, there has always been an emergency affecting the person who has been in emergency need, urgent need of help, and they have been denied and deprived. And because of the institutional kind of denial of access, the fact of the denial of the service has been concealed or disrecorded or disappeared or deleted according to who or where the denial takes place. So it is never known how many actual casualties, how many actual kind of fatalities have affected how many Africans and how many Asians in the so-called system, that is in the various centers, locations, and so-called facilities. So you extrapolate discrimination by subject and go beyond the health kind of sector, if you like, and talk about housing, talk about crime and the reporting of crime, and you extrapolate right across the population, the demography, and you find that victims of crime, if African and Asian generally, are denied remedies against crime. Victims of discrimination in housing are denied remedies over housing. Victims of discrimination in education, for example, one of the most kind of notorious or high-profiled discrimination cases was highlighted about one of the colleges of the Birkbeck College, part of the University of London, where the discriminator was a woman who was employed by the Inner London Education Authority. The woman called Tessa Blackstone. And Tessa Blackstone was taken to court by an Indian origin person, a Hindu person, who alleged a whole list of racist discriminations done by Tessa Blackstone against him. In the 1980s, Tessa Blackstone, who was an employee in the Inner London Education Authority, where I was a member of the schools subcommittee, which in actual fact was her boss committee, if you like. I wrote to Tessa Blackstone after she spoke on the LBC radio, and I told her that her comments were racist. Words to the effect. Remember, that was 1980s. This is nearly 40 years ago. And she replied in a postcard to me saying, in effect, that racism would continue. She didn't regret making a racist comment or making a comment that actually encouraged or tolerated racism. She said confidently that racism would continue. Now, why was I the only person that told her that? Why? Well, that shows the completeness of the list of opportunists, so-called black activists or Asian activists or political activists with African or Asian origins. I'm of Asian origin, so therefore, there were other people around at a so many places, who must have, at least I shouldn't have been the only one who noticed the LBC broadcast, nor should I have been the one to actually take the view that I did take of the contents of Tessa Blackstone's statement. And yet that has been the pattern for decades. I am the one who points this out. There are other people who must be aware of the same things that I have been actively making active comments about, or commentary about, or communications, making communications about. And yet there is no one. Doesn't that say something about the level of servility or the level of dishonesty or the level of corruption on the part of those who seek betterment, yes? Betterment within quotation marks, opportunities. Like, for example, this woman who has been appointed, she looks African origin, but she could be from another country, like, or her immediate medium kind of ethnic travel might be from through the Caribbean, or she might be born to Caribbean parents or Afro-Caribbean parents in the UK. So she has been given a post, a position by the police or the UK Home Office as the kind of commissioner or the monitor of the police. And it has been claimed that the Guardian has claimed, that the Observer has claimed that the police have told her, or words have reached her, to the effect that the major police forces in this country will make a confession, an admission that institutional racism exists in their ranks. Now they are giving credit to her, forgetting at the same time that even if a police force or any number of police forces in Little England make such a confession or admission, that admission or confession would not amount to their admitting the existence of racism, or they are admitting that they are opposed to racism, let alone they are admitting that they are going to do everything possible to stop racism in the ranks. So that's the kind of lying propaganda that is promoted by the media about racism, and what that also leaves out of the reporting in this context about the phrase institutional racism is the fact that the ex-judge McPherson, William McPherson, who was given the task of doing the routine investigation into the London Metropolitan Police's role, behavior after the murder of Stephen Lawrence in April 1993, McPherson was told that police were racist. So instead of accepting that, McPherson came up with the alternative, which was typically dishonest, typically racist, typically imperialistic and colonialistic, and untruthful and dishonest. He came up with the idea of institutional racism. Now, institution is not the individual, whereas the main assertion by those who campaigned for the justice for Stephen Lawrence was that individual police were racist. Now, if individual police were racist, then it automatically kind of provided, intellectually that is, for the existence of institutional racism that did allow individual racism to take place in the first place. So there was no need for Macpherson coming up with the racist alternative of institutional racism. So you extrapolate that institutional racism in the police and cover the National Health Service, cover the political parties, covered the courts of so-called law, and covered the local councils, covered the houses of parliament. They can say that they're all institutional racist, but then you can't pin the actual responsibility for racist behavior on an individual. So the society or the demography is institutional racist, but there is no remedy against racism. Think about that. Now here the Observer on page 39, I think. It's called Focus. And it says, on the brink. And there is the face of Johnson peering from behind some screen or some shade. And it says, after a week of cascading crisis and with a perilous by-election on the way, Tory MPs are openly talking of finding a new leader. And this is byline to Toby Helm and Michael Savage. Now, although it is Savage, the actual rigor is not Savage. So this is the thing, and this is the front page of the same paper, which is saying that Johnson is losing trust, and that could harm bid to curb Omicron surge. This is the explanation of the reason why the previously unannounced so-called statement at 2000 hours GMT was made by Boris Johnson. This is the headline. This is what actually prompted, because what he was showing was that there is no need to lose any trust or any kind of have any lack of confidence in that dealing with the COVID. Now this is the same paper, comment and analysis, the Observer, which is directly contradicting the very factual finding by the same paper. Now here is the editorial of the Observer, which says Boris Johnson is not fit to lead us in this time of crisis. And on the opposite page, page 49, is this Isabel Hardman. Now Isabel Hardman is replacing this issue, the normal writer Andrew Rawnsley. And her piece is headlined, Tory vultures are circling, but they will only feast when Johnson's time is up. What she's saying is that they are not yet ready to treat Boris Johnson as dead, as vultures treat a dead corpse. And that is the editorial, opposite the editorial page, but it is in the same kind of line narrative about Boris Johnson not fit to lead the country in this time of crisis. And yet, this is directly contradicted by the piece on the previous page, page 47 of the Observer, given a byline to Emma John. And it says, do we really want to live in a culture of endless blame games when we are all fallible? In a society driven by gotchas and self righteousness, let's be more ready to recognize our own failings and less hasty to judge others. Now, that is stupid. If those who are responsible for doing damage to others by their actions are not held to account, then there will be no society even to talk about, let alone a real, robust, accountable society. So, to dismiss accountability as a blame game is ignorant, stupid, irresponsible, and corrupt. And this is the problem with the idea of Fleet Street expressing freedom of opinion. That is not freedom of opinion, because similar piece or pieces are published by the Mail on Sunday today, which gives too much space to this really sick person, Peter Hitchens, younger brother of the other Hitchens, who passed away a few years ago. Because Hitchens says I'm looking for the Hitchens page to appear. Now, Hitchens is saying on page 31 of the Mail on Sunday, and his heading is, well, the piece that he has written has got this heading: an entire generation are puzzled by the idea that anyone has the right to say things they don't agree with. And this is Hitchens earning his kind of fees which are undisclosed from the Mail on Sunday or the Daily Mail group, on the pretext that he is expressing an opinion that is unpopular. And he is saying expressing an opinion is seen as hate speech. I shall come more to that in a minute. Because Hitchens, as I have discussed more than once, Peter Hitchens, I've never met Christopher Hitchens, but I was closely reading the stuff that he published in the New SS and other places. And let's say that Peter Hitchens was not as known at the time, while Christopher Hitchens was kind of appearing on pages in Fleet Street. Now, Christopher Hitchens, I think, went out of his way to intentionally make comments that he knew would be controversial, so that he would get to be the topic of discussions among his fellow couriers across Fleet Street. And apart from condemning the likes of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. He did other things in that vein to excite or incite controversy. Instead of raising moral issues, he indulged So this is the point that I was making. There was an interruption. There was probably an interruption of the power supply. Cannot examine while on air, but there was an interruption that lasted more than a minute, I think. What I was saying was that the elder brother of Peter Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens, was drawing attention to himself by condemning the likes of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. As far as is known, at least to me, Mother Teresa didn't do anything that actually violated any morality or ethics or anything. Or nor did she do anything to promote a career for herself. And for Christopher Hitchens to target Mother Teresa was a very clear kind of item of inciting controversy. There was hardly anything that Peter Hitchens says, nor was there anything that his older brother Christopher Hitchens said in their kind of intentional posture platform as expressing a contrary opinion that actually challenged the status quo, that challenged racists, that challenged imperialists, that challenged the crooks and criminals, either in power in the UK or elsewhere. In fact, Peter Hitchens is a regular opponent of anyone who expresses an opinion about the anti-democratic regime in Russia. And there is absolutely nothing that any kind of Fleet Street writer, not just Hitchens, but anyone else, writer in Fleet Street actually says that opposes the institutional, individual racism, corruption, criminality of the state at any level. We focus on the corrupt, criminal judicial bureaucracy in the UK. And likewise, we focus on examining the behavior of the members of parliament, members of the House of Peers, generally the House of Commons, and the various agencies of the UK state. And of course, we carry out world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, like we're doing in this edition here. And Hitchens, either Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens or Peter Hitchens, they are not supporters of any campaign for justice. They never have been. They may claim, they may suggest, but they have not been supporters. By supporters, I of course define anyone who is giving up any benefit, any gain for themselves, any preferment for themselves in order to take part in the opposition to the injustice that must be entailed in any support for any campaign, any cause. So there is a colloquial expression, jobbing, the word jobbing journalist, or jobbing this, jobbing that, meaning that they are doing a routine, going through the motion, doing a routine about being a journalist or reporter, but they're not actually putting their mind into the matter, into the action that they are actually pretending to be engaged in. So what is he saying today, Peter Hitchens? Because Hitchens is not Hitchens is not a part of the kind of racist club that Rod Little, Trevor Kavanagh, et al. Belong to. Because Hitchens is too kind of crafty to allow himself to be counted as one of the mainstream kind of peddlers of racist lies and denials. Rod Little, Trevor Kavanagh, or their ilk. There are about 2 or 3 dozen of them across the British media that do regularly deny racism, deny unfairness, deny corruption in the judiciary, corruption in the UK Parliament as part of their profession. These are professional deniers, professional liars, professional distorters, professional racists. And Hitchens is a professional of his own kind of category, like his brother was. Now, I shall come back to Peter Hitchens in a minute. Now, here on page 130 of the Mail on Sunday today, there is a person being described there as former business secretary. It's Vince Cable, who was the leader of the Lib Dem. And his PC is an abuse of power that reaps billions for technology giants. Now, that's a very easy slogan. But Vince Cable, who kind of was exposed by me in 2009 as an idiot because he was speaking at a Lib Dem gathering held in the Bethnal Green Road, off Bethnal Green Road, called Oxford House. Now that was the time before the Crossrail whole project was officially kind of abandoned by the government because of our campaign. So the campaign against the Crossrail hold was still ongoing in 2009 when Vince Cable was speaking as a Lib Dem. Now he was part of the Condemn coalition, which we call the Condemn collusion. David Sleazeball Cameron was prime minister and Vince Cable was the member of the cabinet, the business secretary or whatever at the time in 2009. And during his statement, at one point, he asked the audience, or generally stated in the interrogative, does Crossrail come through here? Or words to the effect that showed that he didn't know that Crossrail whole project was going through Tower Hamlets. And the organizer, myself, of the campaign against that was there taking his picture, recording him on the video. He was the business secretary, or he was the member of the cabinet fronted by David Cameron, of course. And he asked the audience about Crossrail. Does Crossrail come through here, meaning this borough? And the target of the Crossrail hole that I had been organizing the campaign against for 6 years at that point was Brick Lane, which is not very far from where he was sitting in the Oxford House of the Bethnal Green Road. So it's not just Vince Cable who is an idiot, but despite the fact that he's an idiot, he was a member of the cabinet, he was the Secretary of State. He was a cabinet level member of the cabinet, if you like. So what he's saying here, an abuse of power that reaps billions for tech giants. He's talking about Google, Apple, and others. And he's mentioning iPhone and iPad, etc. Despite the fact that there is this heading and there is this kind of attractive heading that would attract the attention of morally, ethically driven people, Vince Cable doesn't say that the reason why the tech giants are allowed to reap billions is nothing to do with the tech giants themselves, that it is to do with governments, the likes of which he was a member of, and the likes of which is now being fronted by Boris the Congenital Liar Johnson. Because in the ordinary sense of rule of law and due process, any claim against a big giant, tech giant, doing this, reaping billions, should be capable of being resolved by the court ruling against the tech giants. But that doesn't happen. Why? Because as Johnson has recently admitted, when he has said that ministers in his cabinet should ignore rulings of the courts they don't agree with. That means that the so-called myth about the Constitution being made of 4 branches, the executive, the judiciary, and parliament, and the media, This is a myth. And we go back to Peter Hitchens. And despite the fact that he claims to be unlike other Fleet Street crooks and liars, Peter Hitchens is actually defending Fleet Street liars. And he's attacking those who criticize Fleet Street liars. And is conflating too many things to say that Max Mosley, Oswald Mosley's son, had left-wing defenders. Why did the left-wing defenders defend him, the son of the self-proclaimed Oswald Mosley, the fascist? Because, says Peter Hitchens, his left-wing defenders love Mosley's attacks on Fleet Street too much. On the evidence, and I'm saying this on the record, there is no evidence whatsoever that in the UK, any left-wing, genuine left-wing critic of Fleet Street has overlooked Oswald Mosley or his son, Max Mosley's fascism. So why is Peter Hitchens saying that the left-wingers actually supported the fascist Mosley? Because Mosley was critical of Fleet Street. And it is completely confusing because Mosley was not opposing Fleet Street because of any fascist kind of motive on his part. Mosley was actually using the ordinary kind of legal options. Because he had the money, he could take them to court, and he did take them to court, and he got ruling in his favor. Because Mosley was personally kind of making a number of claims allowed by the existing law, let's say. But he just doesn't want to recognize Mosley's right. And yet here he is saying that those who criticize him are violating his right to free speech. But in the same piece, he is denying Max Mosley his right, that is Mosley's right, to criticize Fleet Street. And he goes on, repeating the contradictory assertion and contradicting himself. So the whole piece about free speech is selective. He's not, let's say, he's not talking about racism at all. He's not talking about empire. And he's not talking about the absence of any access to the due process, to the courts of law in this country, to the millions without money. And it goes on, but he is not interested in the many. What he is interested in is the fact that he has been targeted by a group of people who were carrying a leaflet and it was entitled The Words of Peter Hitchens, a brief guide to the bigotry and vanity of Peter Hitchens. And it happened at Balliol College, Oxford, where he had gone to speak about the state grammar schools. And he writes, as I neared the college, the organizers intercepted me to warn I was the object of a protest. The demonstrators awaited me carrying handmade placards declaring history will forget you, stop platforming hate, and welcome to our heresy hunt. Rather, originally, they had decided to object to me in total silence. And they walked backwards in front of me, holding the placards and trying to look hostile. Trying to look hostile. I wonder how they looked. When I saw one of them walking backwards into a bush, I tried to warn her. Obviously, it was a female. But she would not listen to my fascist advice and duly got badly mixed up in the plant. Trying not to laugh, I accepted a leaflet from one of them in which I was denounced in detail for many, many offenses against political correctness over many years. It was entitled The Words of Peter Hitchens, a brief guide to the bigotry and vanity of Peter Hitchens. The fascinating thing about it was that it was all very nearly true. By using slanted reported speech and partial quotation, it managed to suggest that I was an even more horrible person than I no doubt am. Most of all, it gave the impression I'm motivated by hatred of people rather than by dislike of ideas and policies. Now, when I say that he was warning this female, yes, he said that, and they walked backwards in front of me, holding the placards and trying to look hostile. Now, I met Hitchens, as I have said before, not in this edition, but I have said in previous editions. Hitchens was walking along the embankment in central London. Embankment is parallel to Fleet Street. And I was sitting on a bench on the embankment. It was a summer, sunny, hot day. So I was sitting there on the bench. And I recognized him from seeing him on the television. And I spoke to him. And as I've said before, my conversation was entirely intellectual about the issues surrounding Fleet Street and freedom of speech and the column that he was now leaving because the owner of the Daily Express, where he had the column, had changed, and it was Richard Desmond who had taken over. Desmond is a nasty piece of work. So I was trying to engage him in the discussion about Fleet Street, freedom of speech, etc., etc. And did he engage? Most certainly not. Hitchens, the racist, obviously thought I was hostile. The very fact of my being of a different ethnic background to him must have amounted to him as my looking hostile. I'm joking, of course, because what he was doing was refusing to engage in a conversation that he knew would be very rigorous and intelligent. And he wasn't ready to have a conversation with me without any preparation. So he was being personally hostile to me and biased against me and biased against having a conversation with me. So he has written lies in this piece. And he's saying that the minds of the majority of people who object to his writing and his opinions, the mind collectively has been taken over. And he is condemning those who oppose racism, those who oppose imperialism, those who oppose Fleet Street. Now, when the depraved DEFRA, fronted by George Injustice Eustace, was continuing the campaign of lies, inventions, and demonization against this baby angel Geronimo, at whatever point, Injustice was told not to continue. Injustice was told to stop it, as was Boris the Congenital Liar Johnson, as were all the Fleet Street journalists and media. And all the evidence up to now, this minute, shows that baby angel Geronimo has been the target, the most innocent target of the most criminally contrived and confected vilification and lies by the department called DEFRA, which you call depraved DEFRA. So Johnson was asked many times and has been asked many times to stop it, stop the attack on the innocent baby angel Geronimo. And the fact that Johnson has been asked to stop the attacks, depraved DEFRA attacks on baby angel Geronimo, has been made known to Fleet Street, Mail on Sunday, Daily Mail, the Scum, the Times, the Daily Bribing Boris Johnson Graph, the Guardian, the Observer, the Express. All these papers have been told all the facts about the lies by the government against the perfectly innocent, perfectly healthy baby angel Geronimo. But that series of lies by the depraved DEFRA and the collusion and complicity with the lying by the depraved DEFRA, complicity on the part of Boris Johnson, has never been fully reported. And why does it matter? Because if the baby angel Geronimo, the world's healthiest baby angel Geronimo, could be targeted by criminally intended DEFRA without any fact, without any evidence, then others could be equally targeted. So it's evil, dark plan, scheme, conspiracy, plot done by Boris Johnson. And there is no evidence that Peter Hitchens or any other platformed, quote, columnist in Fleet Street has the slightest interest in upholding the freedom of the most innocent baby angel Geronimo. One criminal, the son of Nigel Lie's son, Dominic Lie's son, was given a spot in the same Mail on Sunday, in which Dominic Lie's son mocked the defenders of the innocent baby angel Geronimo, mocked the rights of the innocent, perfectly healthy baby angel Geronimo. This is not Afghanistan. And Fleet Street and Boris Johnson will never accept that they are the Taliban. Yet they behaved with complete brazen, shameless, unconcealed hostility against baby angel Geronimo, because baby angel Geronimo was only guilty of being innocent, only guilty of being perfectly in the best health possible. So the behavior of Johnson and Eustace and others in Fleet Street was worse in their attack against the baby angel Geronimo than anything reported about the behavior of the Taliban at any stage. So what we shall be doing about the behavior of the depraved DEFRA will be to continue on the subject, and we shall be bringing an end to this one because of the time.